Hello and welcome to Cyclocosm.com's How the Race Was Won. After a week of watching, waiting, and listening to overly dramatic stories that had little to do with the race, Stage 15 of this year's Tour de France finally got back into the head-to-head GC battles. Of course, because the Tour can never have only one plot line, the day began with Franco Pellizotti and Igor Martinez continuing their seesaw battle for the KOM title. Their efforts resulted in a mid-sized breakaway getting clear, and last place Kenny Van Hummel getting even more last-placer as he was dropped over the day's first climb. But with the hilltop finish looming in Verbier, only the second to date in this year's Tour, it wasn't going to be a day for the breakaway. As Liquigas and Astana whipped up the chase behind, Simon Spilak, who'd talked his way out of a time cut just a few days earlier, made a last desperate gasp for freedom. Garmin-Slipstream's David Miller led the peloton's charge into the climb, placing team leaders Brad Wiggins and Christian Vande Velde right at the front of the action. Just behind him lay Saxo Bank and Astana, with the reigning champ Carlos Sastre nowhere to be found. As Miller pulled off, Jens Voigt roared to the front and set a devastating tempo that broke the tail of the field into an autobus and strung the rest of the pack out single file. 24 riders down, and still no sight of Sastre. As Saxo Bank drove relentlessly onward, they began to gobble up the last bits of the breakaway, still lingering up the road. Rather than fall away easily, though, Swiss champ Fabian Cancellara jumped immediately to the head of his team's train, powering through the dying breakaway and occasionally gapping the heads of state lined up behind him. Andy Schleck guilefully let these gaps form, forcing Astana and Garmin to crank the few seconds to bring them down. However, in responding to one of these surges, the young Luxembourger accidentally pulled free of his pedal, losing some momentum and valuable space between his front wheel and Alberto Contador. Andy's brother Frank attacked only seconds later, finally shelling the exhausted Cancellara and taking Contador with him. However, somebody decided it would be a good idea to bring the group back together. As Cancellara fell rapidly backwards, the camera finally got its first glimpse of Carlos Sastre, doggedly working his way back through the bunch. Back at the happy end of the field, now consisting of Brad Wiggins, Lance, Contador, and the Schlecks, Frank was setting tempo for Andy, who was parked at the back. Seeing his moment, with one competitor tired from effort and the other languishing 3 riders behind, Contador gave the now obligatory "the look" and danced away. Andy Schleck's response was immediate, but had nowhere near the same level of snap, and Contador continued to build on his already immense cushion. With Wiggins the only logical pace setter, the group behind the 2 leaders swelled as more and more riders clawed their way back up to it. Up the road, Contador powered onward, dancing on the pedals and padding his gap by a few seconds each kilometer, while Andy battled onward in no man's land. As Lance and Andreas Kloden dropped the tempo to further Contador's lead, the attacks began, first Wiggins, who was brought back, then Frank Schleck. As the race reached the final pitches of the climb, Sastre connected with the Astana-controlled group, completing an impressive but wasteful comeback from the cheap seats of the peloton, while Wiggins and Nibali broke clear, reconnecting with Frank Schleck at 2K to go. Sastre gave another surge shortly thereafter, and it immediately became clear who was pacing whom among Astana's second-tier contenders. Contador rolled across the line with his unbearably lame pistol-shot salute. Andy Schleck came across 43 seconds later, losing time all the way to the line, while Liquigas' Nibali led his brother, Brad Wiggins, and the reigning champ across some 20 seconds later. As Lance Armstrong rolled in, a full minute and a half down on Contador, it seemed the question of who would lead Astana at this tour, and possibly who would stand atop the podium in Paris, had finally been settled. I'm Cosmo Catalano, and that's how the race was won.